Welcome to Diagnosing Dx, the podcast giving diagnostics the platform it deserves. While therapeutics and devices often take centre stage, diagnostics is the engine driving precision medicine. I'm your host, David Philby, and each week we spotlight the innovators, breakthroughs, and real-world challenges shaping the future of DX. In this episode of Diagnosing Dx, I'm joined by Rachel Zayas, CEO of AGED Dx, a company taking on one of the most overlooked diseases in healthcare, liver disease. We talk about the grit it takes to build a diagnostics company from scratch, the purpose behind AGED Dx's mission to diagnose disease earlier, and the hard lessons Rachel learned the first time around that are shaping how she's building this company today. This is a conversation about survival, discipline, and what it really takes to bring an early diagnostic to patients. Welcome to the show this week, Rachel. How are you?
Hello, good morning from Washington, D.C. I'm doing great today on this beautiful fall morning.
Oh, that does sound good in DC as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for joining. I've actually I've been looking forward to this conversation, and there's loads of reasons. I want to know more about your science and your purpose and where the company is. But I'm actually really fascinated to hear a lot of your perspective on what you're doing, because I'm going to start with this because I loved it. When you and I got introduced, because you're quite a hard person to track down. You still haven't accepted my LinkedIn request, which you'll have to at some point.
Oh boy, calling me out already.
Yeah, we're into it. I remember I said to you, we got introduced. I tried to do a bit of research. I clicked on AGED Dx's LinkedIn company page, and it's not really set up. And you literally said, you're like, investors don't care. I was like, yes, here we go. We're so in it. So I think we're going to have a really good chat, good fun. But first, please introduce yourself, who you are, your background, career, and where we are.
I love the preamble. Shame on the LinkedIn, and then not worrying about what others think, as long as my investors are happy and they have the updates and the data is coming in. But let me start with my background.
Yeah.
So I am a geneticist by training turned entrepreneur. I grew up in Cambridge, Mass, actually down the street from the Human Genome Project growing up. So by design, I wanted to go into genetics and genomics as a kid and through college. I worked at MIT in cancer research. I worked at the Koch Institute for Integrative Cancer Research for a few years. We were working on a really fascinating nanoparticle based off of mRNA therapies that could navigate the circulatory system and target a specific tissue of origin to then deliver a therapeutic. So I had a blast working there, talking to others, networking, and it was actually there that I realized I wanted to go back to school for business. So instead of going for a PhD, I said, there's so many tools that aren't getting well translated into the clinic. How are we developing all these very advanced therapeutics for things we don't have simple and effective diagnostic tools for? So I went back to school for a master's in biotechnology and business a little over a decade ago. At that time, I launched my first biotech company. It was also a diagnostics company. We were developing a diagnostic kiosk where you could come spit in a tube, and in 15 minutes, we would tell you which of the top 10 respiratory infections you had. This was based off of an isothermal PCR-based modality. So nothing too fancy in there, but the company didn't take off the way that we anticipated. We were around for about maybe 2 to 3 years, but I ended up leaving the company, and the company failed, and you learn really quickly from your failures, like you are when you're world building, like you are with a company. So I took a lot of those lessons to heart and applied them to AGED. So high level summary, but we will get into the nitty gritty in the next few minutes, as we're developing blood tests for fatty liver disease and liver fibrosis. These are associated with diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome, impacts 1 in 3 Americans, and most don't know until it's no longer treatable nor reversible. So we saw these emerging trends 5-6 years ago before there were therapeutics, and we said, let's develop a diagnostic so when these therapeutics come to market, we can push the needle forward for patients, providers, and payers.
Right. So this isn't your first rodeo. I think this is a really important point, isn't it? Because almost going back to that sort of hardened focus you had when we first spoke, and you were right out the gate of just like, these are my priorities, and just the fluff and PR, I guess, stuff like that, which, there's a time and a place for in every company's journey. But it was so clear and fascinating how focused you were. What that first experience then as a founder, what did that teach you? And I guess what happened with the company in terms of, why did it fail? And how open are you sort of willing to be about that now? But, what happened, and what did that teach you?
Yeah, a number of things. So it was the wrong team. We
Okay,
didn't have effective chemistry, so we couldn't agree on who the core decision maker was. And the fundamentals with that were not that anybody were bad people, but rather our core values didn't align. So when you're building a company, mission and vision, core values seems like something nice to have,
sure.
and that's not true. It's actually central. It is an absolute need, because who is in your boat and who you are building alongside is more important than market trends, external factors, competition, because this is your lifeboat. If you can't trust the person next to you to be building effectively and honestly, then that's going to sink the ship faster than anything else. So it was the wrong team. We didn't have core values that aligned, and because of that, we fundraised some, but it wasn't as effective as it could have been for those reasons. So
What do you mean? Because in the funding side, do you mean because maybe the message wasn't coming across as clearly or as centrally as it would have done if you knew who was the sort of, the front and center?
correct, yes.
Mm,
So if there was alignment on what we wanted to do for the next 1, 3, 5 years, we could have had a very crystal clear message that then led to what we were doing in the lab. And because um, we couldn't agree on how to go about X, Y, and Z and the path forward, that is ultimately what led to the company's failure. Because there's 1,000 ways you can go, but which way is the right way based off of data and insights? So a few things
mm.
there.
Yeah, fascinating. Do you did you want to be a founder then? Because obviously this is the second time round. Is this like it's not necessarily the traditional private professional career outside of, academia and so forth, but did you want to bring novel products to market and be the sort of, head of that?
Not at all. This path came to me. When I was working in industry, I had a number of good bosses. I had a number of not so good bosses where I was like, how did you get here? How are you leading this ship
Mm,
and imparting wisdom to the next generation of individuals who are tired, burnt out, focused on generating papers rather than impact? And I said, there has to be a better way. So when I was working in industry, it became ever present that a lot of what scientific innovation is focused on, unfortunately, is in the therapeutic space and the med
right.
device space that is later stage.
Yeah.
So at some point in our lives, we are all patients. So whether that's like a parent or a sibling or a partner, um, I don't want to live in a world where we have thousands of later stage therapeutics, but there's nothing to treat early or to diagnose early. And I think that the medical system has gone down a path that doesn't serve patients, because if it did, we would be focused on preventative medicine from day one. This would be front and center in medical school, in nutrition, in diagnostics, and it's just not. So I saw this and I took a deep dive into, okay, what innovative diagnostics are coming out. I saw 23andMe and Ancestry.com, and I'm like, this is not pushing the needle forward for
Sure.
patients. So
Mm,
I said, well, instead of joining one, why don't we build one together with a great team that is in alignment with core values and mission that can execute on the science? So I did not want to be a founder. This came to me, and I went into the sciences to make a difference in patients' lives, and this is the best way I see fit to do that.
that's awesome. This time round, you're the CEO. right? So
Yes.
you've stepped up to be the person. Your name's above the door. Have you had to learn new things or sort of embrace new things, expose yourself to new things in the CEO role this time round?
Absolutely. There's not a day in this journey as CEO where there's not a learning curve. You're constantly learning, constantly iterating, especially as you're going from idea to iteration to clinical trial to commercial traction. That like
Mm.
there's so many nuances in between, and there's experts at every step of the way. So for me, I would probably say I'm chief generalist because I need to know a little bit about everything that everybody's doing because I need to have a competent conversation. How do you do this? What are the challenges? What can I do to equip you with the resources necessary to succeed? So a lot of the things that I didn't anticipate but are now front and center are things like um, understanding leadership and accountability
Mm.
and supporting teams with um, yearly OKRs, objectives and key results. And then how does that trickle down to our quarterly goals? And then how do we actually execute on that? So things of that sort. I didn't learn that in business school or in all of my scientific training. What is a level of accountability that has the human element and then a realistic element to deliver on? Because those goals are going to translate into all of our traction. So how do we get there? So that's one big thing. There's many others that I could ramble on to.
Do you enjoy all that stuff now? And the because it sounds like you're really passionate about the science and bringing new science, to the market to impact patients' lives. But have you come to enjoy the leadership and the business side, and I guess the investment side, because everyone wants to talk about that?
Yes. I'm gonna give you an example of something that happened very early on in my entrepreneurship journey for this company. So I went through a course called National Science Foundation I-Corps. So I-Corps helps really early stage companies, mostly tech, and a lot of biotech,
Mm.
go out and talk to customers and validate product market fit. You go out with a set of hypotheses and then you generate a list of questions to say, what are your biggest problems? How are you solving this?
Right.
Um, why? How much does this cost? Who's the decision maker in your organization? And you learn directly who your customer is and who your customer isn't. And the model basically teaches you to invalidate hypotheses and iterate. So you fail forward and you fail from learning. Um, and I remember I took a class at GW probably 7 or 8 years ago with, a group led by Dan Kunez, and at the time, when we were presenting, we had to when we made claims from that analysis, we had to, say, like, what we learned from the insights. So everybody in the room, the panelists of professors as well as all other companies in the room had a red piece of paper and a green piece of paper. So if you said something that was speculation and there was no evidence from that from your customer interview, the entire room would hold up a red card and say, speculation, there's no evidence for this. And you would literally have to stop talking. And
Love
I
it.
love that because it
Yeah.
it allowed a level of accountability to say, I don't want to get in the way of developing a product for somebody that doesn't need this or want this. So you have to
Mm.
take your product and your bias out of the analysis and just talk about what their problems and challenges are without it being about you. So it is not um, product centric, it is not company centric, it is not individual centric, but it is truly for the customers from their feedback. So that experience was um, pretty paramount in
Yeah.
where we are today because it really led to a message of you fail forward and you can
Mm.
walk into a room and not know anything about a subject that you need to be an expert in 8 weeks and learn. So it's that growth mentality, it's that openness, that humility. I
Mm.
think that those are the fundamentals of being a founder and being a gritty startup company.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. We're going to come on to this later because we're going to talk a bit more about investment and your approach to non-dilutive funding. I actually watched one of your it's like a 1 minute pitch that you had to do at a competition. It was awesome. And I just, when I was watching it, I was like, there's no way that Rachel knew that 10 years ago or coming out of college. That's something you've learned, through sort of, repetition and iteration in your career and failures along the way. But it's awesome. Actually, any of the listeners, I recommend looking it up on YouTube. It's a 1 minute pitch Rachel does for some non-dilutive funding. It's awesome. But let's talk about, we're here to talk about AGED Diagnostics, the new firm. So who are AGED Diagnostics and what are you trying to achieve?
Yes. So AGED is a startup company here in Bethesda, Maryland. We're developing blood tests for fatty liver disease and liver fibrosis. These diseases are associated with diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome, impacts 1 in 3 Americans, and many don't know until it's no longer treatable nor reversible. The reason for this is that there are very few effective non-invasive diagnostic tools. Liver biopsies are the gold standard. This is a 12 to 16-inch needle liver biopsy. This is not serving the patient population of 100 million people. It's expensive, invasive, prone to sampling error and bleeding. Really not doing it for early detection. So there's a bottleneck there in the number of biopsies that they're deemed necessary, but patients aren't getting diagnosed. There are second-tier imaging modalities, but you never walk into a primary care clinic and say, let me get you an imaging tool unless there's something wrong with your liver. So
Right.
this is a really ineffective model that exists today. So everybody knows about liver enzymes. So you have AST and ALT. If these are elevated, you most certainly have a problem with your liver. If they're not elevated, as they're not in 70 to 80% of patients, that doesn't mean you're in the clear. So AST is a better screening tool for late-stage fibrosis. But if we take a step back, there are really two major manifestations going on here clinically. So you have MASH, or fatty liver disease, and that's a spectrum. There's simple steatosis, which is the benign form, and then there's MASH, NASH, which is the advanced form. With NASH, then you can have varying stages of liver fibrosis. So you can have you can be healthy, simple steatosis, MASH, with all 4 stages of fibrosis. AST is best suited for stage 3 and stage 4 liver fibrosis. This is not going to diagnose patients early to be able to get them treatment, intervention, and lifestyle modifications, which is exactly what a number of patients need. So at AGED, we've developed a blood test, 2 blood tests that can stage through full spectrum of disease. We can differentiate simple steatosis from MASH, and then we have a second separate set of biomarkers that can fully quantitatively stage liver fibrosis. We are currently in the middle of a 500 patient clinical trial. We have 11 clinical trial sites as of today enrolling patients across the United States. The utility of ensuring that we have so many sites is that we want to make sure we have geographic and biodiversity in the patients that we are enrolling in this study. We don't want from a single site or single region. We want to make sure the signals we're picking up can be reproduced in disparate sites throughout the United States. So for us, we really do things by the book. My COO, his name is Dr. Eric Eastman. He actually came out of retirement a few years ago to come co-develop this company alongside us. So he is he has a PhD in human genetics and has been in the diagnostic space for about 40 years. He has 9 exits and was very comfortably retired
Wow.
when I met him. And I was a solo founder with just a team of consultants, and he saw the unmet need for NASH MASH. He saw a number of the events that we've done, the traction that we've done. So he said, I can come in and make an impact. It didn't start there. He first started as an advisor, and then he's like, all right, I'll come on as a consultant. And then he's like, all right, I'll come on part-time. And then it was like, all right, I'll come on as COO, but
I'm in.
I'm in. Yes. So we do things by the book. Eric has done this through experience dozens of times. He knows what it looks like to cut corners,
Mm,
to cut corners and not follow the specific and instrumental steps you need. We set up our own lab. We have 70 plus standard operating procedures (SOPs) that have been approved from our team from scratch. So we set up our own lab. We hired an excellent lab director. Her name is Jasmine Kirksey, who has literally brought this lab to fruition from scratch, and then a number of members to support her in her mission. So doing things uh, in our lab with our people, with our SOPs is really critical for these developmental stages. Early, it's okay to outsource when there's no capital, but you get to a point where if you really want this to be a successful venture and a successful set of biomarkers that actually will serve patients one day, you need to take that accountability into your own hands with your own people to execute. So we're currently in the middle of a 500 patient clinical trial. We are generating data. We will have an interim readout of clinical trial data in actually just a couple weeks. So really excited to share that with our investors and our collaborators. It's been many years in the making to start this study, enroll these patients, and
mm.
data's looking good. So
So many positives, so many positives. Before I move on from the purpose in patient populations, I want to know this because, and I think this is important for the regular person who might not be aware. If you're catching liver disease of any type late on through symptoms are starting to flare up, is what sort of symptoms are people seeing, and how is that affecting their lives at that point? And are we at a point there where things are irreversible to a certain extent? What's the sort what what are patients experiencing in the current standard of care when they go get a biopsy done because they're experiencing some sort of symptoms?
So, first and foremost, before symptoms, there's comorbidities. So, patients with diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome are higher risk for developing a number of the symptoms I'm about to list.
Right.
So, symptoms for later stage, and this is why this is so problematic. And I'll go further into this in a moment. But liver disease is known to be the silent killer. There are
Right.
really no symptoms in your early stage. So you're not having abdominal pain or jaundice in like with fibrosis 1 or 2. It's 3 or 4. So symptoms are non-specific abdominal pain, fatigue, jaundice, ascites, swelling of the stomach. So things of this super non-specific. There's many
Mm,
organs here. This could be related to anything. So
mm,
when you have these symptoms, and you go to either a primary care physician or a specialist, they're going to say, I think you either need to go to a cardiologist, endocrinologist, or hepatologist. And there's a big bottleneck with that
mm.
last one in the United States. There's only 4,000 board certified hepatologists in the United States.
Wow.
So there's 330 million people here. That's not going to serve a third of the population or even the 20% of that population that is high risk. So the problem is the liver has been the forgotten organ, and this is really problematic. There needs to be, and I know we'll get into this later, but there does need to be a PR and marketing push
Mm,
in order to educate patients for
yeah.
them to take autonomy and responsibility of asking these questions. We know about heart health, we know about cancer, we know about neurodegenerative diseases, but this is the disease that has been forgotten because it is a silent epidemic. But the liver is a vital organ. It is
Mm.
the only organ in the human body where if you cut out 75% of it, it will still regenerate.
Wow. Wow.
It is that evolutionarily important. So
You,
don't
you
don't rely on me, rely on evolution.
yeah. You mentioned education, which actually across diagnostics is such an important part of any commercial success, for want of a better term, and the diagnostic success being, meeting their end purpose. Um, when you guys go to commercialize, does that mean, well, I guess, what sort of patient populations are you going to initially target to get these tests done? Because obviously it's not going to be, hey, US, can we can we everyone take a test? You know, the education and the sort of direct, who's that sort of first population of people that you go, okay, you guys need to start taking this test, and is that then a recurring thing because of their other conditions?
Yes. So from a very broad perspective, the entire field exists in silos. This does not help anybody because the hepatologists are not talking to the cardiologists, who are not talking to the endocrinologist, and
Mm,
everybody thinks that their specific organ of focus is the most important. That
right.
is problematic, and that needs to change because we are people first. We do not exist in specific specialties. We
Yeah.
and silos. We are complex and dynamic entities, and we should be treated as such. So, with that being said, our go-to market is absolutely to start with hepatologists and gastroenterologists. They are keenly aware of the challenges with diagnosing NASH and liver fibrosis early. So, a number of the physicians that we've spoken to have indicated that if they had a patient come in with non-specific pain before they do a biopsy, before they do imaging, they could do our panel to either rule in or rule out NASH and then stage fibrosis potentially. That's
Mm,
our go-to market, but we really want to make sure we're serving the larger market to make sure that our technology and then the therapeutic tools that are on the market can intervene. So, our second tier and of equal importance is cardiology and endocrinology. So, patients who already have been diagnosed with um, diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, these are high risk patients.
mm,
And at a certain point, it's still reversible for a long time. This disease moves through one stage every 7 years of development on average. So if we can get these patients in their 30s, 40s, or early 50s to say, okay, you have NASH, and here's what you need to do from lifestyle and diet modifications. And if that doesn't work, and we'll track you over time, then you need to get into GLP-1s or Rezdiffra's, or Rezdiffra, which is a thyroid beta agonist. So
that's fascinating. Education, education, education. We hear this all the time about how you can have the best test in the world if you're, and it's difficult to change existing workflows, right? It's one of the uphill battles we face in the US healthcare system, is the stubbornness of the system in place and trying to bring new things into that. It's a core part of everybody's go-to-market strategy. Um, the 500 patient clinical trial, assuming good data, fingers crossed, sounds like you guys are confident. Where does that put you then as a company? And I guess give me a bit of the history of the company. Where are you guys? Because nobody knows anything about you, Rachel. You've been so secretive. Where are you guys? What have you raised? What have you done? You've got this trial going on. What does that mean when it's completed?
yes. So about 6, 7 years into development, I'll take a step back just to explain where we are and then what's coming up next after um, a great data readout from this study. So to start, a really challenging question is how do you get data without capital, and then how do you get
Mm,
capital without data? So what I did was I hired a team of like a couple consultants, bioinformaticists, who actually still one of them to this day still works with the company, which just really has served us so effectively from that dedication over the years. So I hired a team of consultants, and then what I did was I reached out to literally hundreds of scientists from the European Bioinformatics Institute and NIH and asked if they could share de-identified data from their sequenced patients. And two actually responded. So we used open source data sets to show, hey, we have this technology and I can speak to it high level, but I can't go into the nitty gritty. It is a targeted methylation sequencing assay. So we were looking at methylated biomarkers directly in the liver. The first question in development is, can you actually discern between the benign and advanced form of MASH directly in the liver? So we got access to open source data sets to ask that question. I funded it from my pocket, and I said, okay, we're gonna show that this works. on the liver, and then I'm going to shop this data around with some very, very early stage investors who want to take a chance really on us as a company. And then this little bit of data that we have to say, let's try this out in patient blood.
Mm.
Um, but we didn't have the money to do a clinical study or do this in-house. So at that time, we were really a virtual company. So we worked with biobanks for a little bit of time to get access to well-characterized patient samples. And then I said, I want to step forward and make sure that we have the best samples possible. The biobanks, you never know how long they're sitting there for. They've been a freezer for a number of years. So I started going to conferences and I said, and I would sit in the front of the events and I would speak to as many of the speakers as possible. And I'm a straight shooter, David. When you and I first met a few months ago, and you're like, you don't have a LinkedIn profile. I'm like, I know, nobody cares. Do you care? Because I don't care. My investors don't care.
Yeah.
I would go to these conferences and I would literally go up to the speakers and say, would you be interested in sending me patient samples for a small biomarker study? And a lot of people were like, are you out of your mind? Like, who are you? And like after asking maybe 20 people, a couple said yes. And they were like, well, we'll send you a material transfer agreement. I'll have my legal team talk to your legal team. We'll send samples wherever you need. And I said, how much and then we went from there. So being very, very nitty gritty. So to take this a step back, we did a few proof of principle studies directly in the liver. We did a few pilot studies directly in peripheral blood, some from a biobank, some from KOLs in the hepatology space. And then that data was what we needed to say, let's launch this into a 500 patient study to evaluate the biomarkers we found in those smaller studies, the claims, the context, and go from there. So we set up our lab. We launched this study earlier this year, and this is where we are today.
Have you
Going,
raised capital?
yes. So today we've raised a little over 5 million. So
Nobody
yeah,
knows. Nobody
nobody
knows.
knows. Nobody knows. Um,
That's awesome.
we did a couple like early stage like angel rounds where we said if you give us $125,000 we'll test this out, and everyone said you need to raise $1 million. I'm like, I don't think we need to raise $1 million. I was like, we're getting samples, we can outsource this, and I was like, then we just pay our bioinformaticists and I'm not going to get paid, and I just want to see if this works. If this doesn't work, we have no business being here. So I asked a team of investors if they could put in $125,000 just to test this out in peripheral blood. And I said, if this works, can you double down on your investment in 6 months? And they said, sure. So we did a few really early stage investments. We closed a seed round earlier this year. It was a $3.5 million seed round that was half angel networks, half micro VCs, a good combination of individuals. And we'll be raising again. We'll be raising again our Series A next year. So,
So at the end of the clinical trial, assuming good data, what does that mean for what's the next phase of the company then? Are you looking at, some sort of LDT test or commercializing? Are you seeking some sort of FDA approval? What's your plan from there?
yes. So after this study, there are two major studies after this that we can conduct, not simultaneously, but back to back. So after this study, it will be a validation study and then a clinical utility study. So that will be in 2026 and 2027. We plan to launch as a lab developed test. So LDTs are regulated by CLIA.
Yeah.
Thank goodness we all knew with the Chevron ruling a number of years ago that LDTs were being attempted to be regulated by the FDA. This would have been very problematic for a number of early stage biotech companies.
Yeah.
And it would have had an impact on patients because a lot of the tools that we use today are not FDA approved. It's a whole different regulatory body. So we'll launch as a CLIA CAP lab out of our lab in Bethesda, Maryland. Our plan is to initiate early traction, launching around 2028, and for a few years operate out of that single lab. The utility of doing that is we can learn from the data, the real world data, once we get to the market. So we will launch as an LDT, generate traction we throughout the United States, but out of our single specialty lab here in Bethesda, and then apply to the FDA a few years later. Our team has done this 24 times in the past, where they've gone the LDT route, shown some traction, learned from the patient data, demographics, biomarkers, and then locked in the technology, and then gone through FDA. At which point we can then license kits or license our technology, or possibly be acquired.
Wow. Big
Yeah.
plans. So the Series A, and the purpose of raising that Series A, is that to fund the two subsequent trials?
Yes. The 2 subsequent trials and then have enough money, for market launch, so that will get us
Yeah,
through the next 3 years of development.
that's awesome. Um, the plans are like this. Everything feels really robust. Is that by design? Are you sort of? Is that maybe sort of your experience from the past, but also your COO, who's obviously got the battle scars to show it, and the exits, like unbelievable track record. Everything
Yeah.
feels. I mean, you mentioned them 70 SOP. I think you're the first seed CEO who's ever come on and talked about SOPs, right? That's like incredible. You're talking about OKRs in the team. It's like OKRs are like they were designed for big corp, I think, but everything feels so sort of like robust and in place. Is that do you feel that's very intentional in the way you want to operate?
It's so intentional. It's on purpose. We didn't start here, but
Yeah.
we've aspired to be here for many years, and then the level we are at today, we aspire to be 10x better in 3, 5, 8 years. One thing I didn't mention previously, but is really important. The failure of my first company led me to identify what our core values are as a company. And then when we hired, we have a very rigorous internal hiring process. It's 3 steps, a lot of opinions between me, the board, some of our investors, some of our trusted collaborators. So we drill you for who you are as an individual, as well as subject matter expert in the role that we need to hire you in,
Mm.
to make sure that you align with our core values. Are you intellectually curious? Exothermic? Do you lead strategically? These 3 things are what will guide the company to that next level of success. So we have these core values, and if you were we rank them on a scale of 1 to 5. If you are below a 3 for anything, we for anybody who's evaluating you, we will not hire you.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to think of. I speak to a lot of seed stage CEOs, right? And a lot of them live in the now, right? They're just dealing with the current problem, and a lot of them problems in recent history tend to be around money, right, and raising capital and so forth. Um, Not many. It feels like you're operating a business that is 2 stages ahead of where you are in terms of processes in place, systems, standard operating procedures, and all these kind of things. And how big is the headcount? 'Cause we must be like a handful of people, right?
We are 4 full-time
Yeah.
and 7 part-time, and that includes so for full-time, it's me as CEO, Eric as COO, Jasmine Kirksey as our lab director, Maklit Telehoun as our scientist 2 in the lab. We have a few lab technologists that come in a couple days a week for, additional support, and then we have a couple people part-time who are running, clinical
Yeah.
trial coordinators. So just those fundamentals. But what we've done really effectively is find the best people to do their niche operations. So I know what my limitations are. Eric knows what his limitations are, and we say, what are we missing here? And then we hire that part time. And a number of these people have worked with Eric in the past, so it's actually a very interesting team dynamic. I would say half the team is in their 30s and 40s, and the other half is 60s and 70s. So it's really, really good team dynamics with I've been here before and done this successfully, and I'm growing in my career, and I'm a rising star, but I'm relying on you for insight and operations from experience.
Yeah. Awesome. Just what a great team harmony that you've put together with the people in it, right? Just fantastic. You've mentioned, I think you and I actually spoke about this offline in terms of your approach to non-dilutive funding and actually how because it's been difficult, right, in terms of what's happening with the NIH this year, but with regards to sort of competitions and grants, and you've actually had I wouldn't say a bit of luck, that's unfair, but you've actually had some success in sort of competitions and stuff
Yeah.
throughout the journey.
Yes. So one thing I learned early in this journey is that we didn't have enough data to be competitive at the time for a number of grants. Now we've submitted to some grants with the data we have, but early on, we would spend months working on grants, and then it would be a 9-month response rate, and it would be a no, and the company wasn't even at that point, anyways. So I think we applied for a number of grants, and I said, you know what? Let's try a new model. Let's do face to face with investors. Let's do pitch competitions and get real time feedback. Because
Yeah.
if I can give you a 10-minute pitch and then you're going to ask me questions, and then I'm going to go find you after you ask me questions and say, what else can we work on? I can incorporate that into the pitch deck for tomorrow and then have grown from this process over a 24-hour span. With grants early on, it wasn't a good ROI on our time investment. So for pitches, I said, let's get out there. So I hired a team of business students from George Washington University and the greater DC area to literally scour the globe for pitch competitions and events. So we had this funnel where they would apply to 4 pitch competitions a week. We had a working list of maybe, I don't know, 50 of the top questions anybody could ask us, the lengthy version, the succinct version, and we would work on this together. So, in between 2023 and 2024, I think I won 42 pitch competitions.
What?
Yeah. So we raised about $380,000 in non-dilutive capital from these pitch competitions, and the utility of this was not just to raise money, it was to get in front of investors who could participate in our seed round or
Sure.
our Series A. So that visibility was really impactful of, okay, we're out here, we're talking to people, nobody responds to emails, nobody responds to LinkedIn messages. So like we want to be front and center. So that has really helped us get to where we are today and earned the social capital we need to get from this stage to the next stage, relying on our network.
That is unbelievable that you won 42 competitions. Now, I assume that some of them would have been biotech, life sciences specific. Some of them would have just been any sort of, innovation, novel,
Yeah.
any sort of business. Maybe you could compete against tech. That's absolutely fascinating.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
that's you really in terms of you're doing the pitches, right? So this is so
Yeah.
you're the geneticist turned pitch master, just like
Yes. Pitch master is actually a great title.
that is so good. I need to get that out there. That's what I'm gonna post that on LinkedIn later on. I'm not gonna put your name. I'm just gonna say I just spoke to someone who that is so good. Seed stage CEOs need to hear that. Are they just sitting in their office thinking this science is going to change the world? And it's like, get out there and pitch and win competitions, be in the eyes of investors, then go ask the investors questions. What an unbelievable story. That is awesome, Rachel.
Yes, yes. We've done a very intentional job of writing down the questions and what we need to work on. Some things don't resonate, some things
Sure.
do, and you know me, I'll take as much as I can, but I'll also push back if I don't think if it's sage or insightful advice. So we had a working list of many questions people had asked, and I'm like, let's just learn and grow from this and iterate. Um, I'll tell you a quick story because I think it's relevant. To start off our seed round, we knew we had to go to the West Coast a number of times to really um, be in front of investors because nobody's picking up the phone calls, nobody's responding to emails.
Right.
One of our um, first investors into this round, who's now on my board, I met with this gentleman 3 or 4 times, and he was like, "You guys are too early, come back in a few years." And I was like, "Could you just take a 30-minute meeting?" I was like, "I can walk you through some of the data we have, talk about, like, our early partnerships and collaborations." And he's like, "No, no, you're too early." So, in 2023, I took 17 trips to Palo Alto from DC, and I just kept going to life science events because I was like, "Somebody's gonna take my meeting if I'm just, like, in their face all the time." So I think I met with Sammy Datwani from Life Science Angels like 4 times before he's like, "All right, I'll take a 20-minute meeting." He's like, "I just have 20 minutes, and that's it." I was like, "I need 5." I was like, "I need 5 to walk through the pitch deck, and then I will let you go." And he saw the pitch, and he really ushered us through the process with Life Science Angels. They were one of the first few um, groups to come into the seed round, and then their stamp of approval really facilitated probably another 5 to 750,000 quickly.
Right.
And the important message here is that you have to keep showing up, and no is not a no, it's a not yet. Keep asking. So
Fascinating. That's
yeah.
so good. The amount of the effort to go above and beyond. People don't hear this enough. People don't hear what it actually takes to get in front of investors at an early stage, especially, in recent times, probably since the 2021, frivolous spending. It's been a tough 4 years for raising capital, especially in diagnostics, and you've absolutely nailed it. Um, Rachel, this has honestly been one of the most enjoyable conversations I've had. It's been absolutely fascinating. Obviously to hear about the science and the purpose and the patients you're trying to help and impact, but almost as equally the business operations that you're putting in place at such an early stage, and actually how you got here and how much you deserve to be here is so fascinating. I think anybody listening to this will not only hope and root for your test and it's that outcome 100%, but also the way you're running this business and leading it from the front and the things you've had to do to get here. People will be rooting for you as a young entrepreneur who deserves to see success. Honestly, Ray, just absolutely fascinating. I really appreciate you sort of coming on and sharing the story.
Thank you for allowing us this platform to discuss our team tech impact. Everybody, think about your liver as much as you can. It is one of the most important organs. Ask questions, talk to your physician, and be healthy.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you, David.